particular group, and they've invited me several times. They meet in the town of Old Orchard Beach, Maine, and they've been meeting there for over 100 years, every summer. And every summer they have a guest preacher each Sunday in their big church. So I've done that a few times. And last summer I was invited, and 6 months before they had asked me for a topic that I'd be preaching about, just so they could do their publicity. They put out a whole booklet, kind of this looks like this. But when I got there, I was spending a few days there before the Sunday where I was going to be speaking. This was when the war in Gaza was going on last summer, or right after it. I don't remember exactly, but it was very much on everybody's minds. And because they all knew I'm a rabbi, they kept asking me about my thoughts about it. And I went to the director of the program, and I said, I know I gave you this topic 6 months ago, but I think I need to talk about this, about what's going on. He said, yeah, you do. And I talked about exactly the same topic. I didn't go through all of these, but I did talk about the All-Meth website. And I stressed this idea that the other side has a story. And we don't have to necessarily agree with the story, but we have to recognize that the other side has a story. They're never going to completely agree with us. We're never going to completely agree with them, but there has to be at least as much mutual respect as accepting that they have a story. Well, afterward, after the service, and I was standing and greeting whoever wanted to come up and shake my hand, there was one woman who came up and she said, I've always been a one-story sort of person, but you made a lot of sense, and so I'm going to start listening now to the other side's story.
Nice. Wow.
Which is more than I usually get back from that kind of a situation, right? It's also why when I have something positive to say, I make a big effort to say it, because people are very quick to complain and not very quick to say positive things. And so I try to balance that.
Well, basically what you're doing is planting a seed and hope that it grows.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And we'll come back to the idea of seeds in just a few minutes. Okay, let's see. Where did I want to go next?
Please. The use of radio and television and computers and all the ways that we can send out messages into the ether somewhere, I think is significant in that if you're tuned in at all, you're going to get it whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And then you can decide if you want to continue to listen.
Yeah.
And even if you're doing the dishes and the Israeli music station is on, and your hands are wet, you're not going to go do, it goes into the air and into people's ears and eyes, whether they think it's going to go there or not.
Are you talking about propaganda?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about propaganda?
That's the way it works. The good kind of
One person's propaganda is another person's telling their story.
That's propaganda, yes.
I think the other thing, too, is even though it may be a small group, you gain strength by knowing that there really are others out there who feel that way.
Yes,
And though we always see on the news is the bad stuff, but even if there's just 20 people, it's 20 people. I'm not alone in thinking, this is nuts. Let's do something different.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Pyramid scheme. It's a pyramid scheme.
It
One
is.
person will tell the next one. And
But isn't this the way that human society has always functioned? Was it Margaret Mead, I think, the famous anthropologist, who said, paraphrase because I don't remember exactly, but never discount the power of a small group of people to make a difference. Indeed, nothing else ever has.
In fact, the thought just came to me that I've heard in a number of places that it only takes 10% of a population to sway opinion or to sway. We could look at gay marriage, we can look at recycling, we can look at conservation. It really only took a certain number of people before it became normal. And the thing that everybody does and nobody thinks it's weird or left wing or anything to recycle your bottles.
Yeah, now it's mainstream.
It takes, and 10% is not a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly it.
well, actually, all you have to do is look at the story 12 Angry Men. It only takes 1 in 12. It's not even 10%.
Perfect example. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, great. Art. Somebody have one labeled art. Yes.
Okay. Artsbridge Incorporated. Making a difference through art utilizes collaborative art making and reflective dialogue to build lasting relationships between youth caught on either side of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We provide a safe environment which cultivates creativity, voice, respectful listening, and dialogue, empowering today's youth to become leaders in the quest for peace in and between their own communities. And it's, the website is artsbridgeinstitute.org.
I forgot, I'll go back to the radio station that we talked about just before. So I wanted to mention, go to their website, and it plays, you can click on listen on air like you can do with any radio station these days. And you can listen to this radio station broadcasting from the Middle East. And I don't know, I think at different hours, certain hours it's in Hebrew, and certain hours it's in Arabic, and certain hours it's in English. I assume that they play, music appropriate to the language. I don't know. I really haven't had the time to sit and listen to them. And you might even stumble on an hour when my nephew is broadcasting. His name is Micha Kurtz. He's a great kid. Yeah, he's 30 years old.
Oh, here.
Oh, you have it.
All you really need to do is go to the Alliance for Middle East Peace website, and then you'll have links to all these other ones. Each one of these paragraphs, I think there's one organization that for some reason they don't have a link, but all 80 some others, you can link directly to their own website from the allmem.org. That's the beauty of it.
I can send an email that has the
Good,
website.
thank
Great.
you. Thank you.
Great. Anybody want to comment about the art group? Again, it's people doing what they like to do.
Right.
It's speaking to each other in a language that they have in common, even if they have no other language in common. This is what they're doing.
You had mentioned that humor is a universal language, which I consider an art.
You talk too softly, Pat. None of us can hear you.
I don't have it in me.
If you just talk this way,
Okay. We were talking about humor being a universal language, which I do consider an art, but all of the arts are universal language because we don't need to use our own tongue language to communicate. Body language, music, visual.
Absolutely.
But
How do you know who Rachel is?
It doesn't take much.
with all the glories of music and dance and art and drama and literature and all the rest of it, how do you get through to the ones who say there is only one story and it's mine?
Like I said, it's retail. It isn't wholesale. For example, let's look at that one, the art that we just read. These are youth. It doesn't say specifically what age, but usually when people say youth, they're talking teenagers, right? Teenagers make, unlike 3 or 5-year-olds that we're going to be hearing about in a moment, teenagers make their own decisions about what they want to participate in. Sometimes it might be based on, I don't want to be part of them, or it might be, I'm artistic and I want to share that with other people who feel artistic, and I don't care what language they speak at home, and I'm going to go join. And maybe that person will have a really fantastic experience and go back and say to his or her classmates in their, only Arabic speaking or only Hebrew speaking school the next day, wow, I had a great time doing art with some other kids who happen to be Israeli. And that's how it's written, as Natalie was saying. It takes only a few to begin. Yes?
Also, I think of it as not just today. Maybe there are things that we can't change today, but this is the future.
Exactly. You have to start somewhere. And that's what all these people are doing.
Okay, so probably too shtick, but Passover's just over, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so isn't that the whole story of Passover? Is everybody wandered in the desert for 40 years to make sure the old generation was gone? Because you had to start somewhere.
Yeah, and since
I was in Israel years and years ago. We were in a bus, West Bank. All of a sudden the bus stopped because there were people going across the huge group of people. And they said, get off the bus, get off the bus. It was an Arab wedding. They wanted us to join them.
Yes.
You know, so it was, it was positive. It was, no, we were scared to death because
Thought it was a riot.
all of a sudden the men and the women were separated.
Yep.
And they took us women into a room that was lined with men. And it's like, okay, we're going to be sold. But yeah, they both moved us with open arms. And
Yeah.
and you weren't sold. I mean, we're sold.
Twice in the last few years, I have co-led interfaith trips to Israel. And the last time was almost 2 years ago. And we were in Jerusalem, and this was a group of a few Jews, quite a few Christians, and one token Muslim. Most of them from Maine, and where I was living before. And we were standing in line, a very long line of tour groups, waiting to get into where the Temple Mount, where the big mosques are, up above the Western Wall. And suddenly there's this whole bunch of people on the walkway next to us come dancing with a moving chuppah with a young man under it, heading for his bar mitzvah at the Western Wall. And you've got 2 or 3 klezmer musicians marching with them, playing and making them happy, and it was wonderful. And it was, the Christians were just, in the group, were just, wow, you know. But that's the kind of cross-cultural stuff that I'm talking about. If we wait until there's a problem and only talk to the other about the problem, we'll never solve the problem. We have to get to know each other before the problem arises, just as people. Because one of my little mantras is, it is so much harder to hate when the other has a name at the face.
We've had this exchange program where kids come over as campers or whatever in the summer. Has anybody followed through what happens to those kids when they become adults, when they go back? Because they're from Israel, Palestinian.
the Israeli music troupe?
Well,
No. I'm talking about the kids who come for camp.
It would depend on the organization that's sponsoring it. But one of the groups we're going to hear about in a few minutes does exactly that, and yes, does a lot of follow-up with it. So hold the thought, and we'll get to it. Yeah.
I was going to say that one of the things, when you were talking about the bus, is, you know, the interpretation that people have.
Yeah.
You can interpret that, oh my God, they're going to kill us, you know, but once you are more open to hearing the motivation behind people's behavior, the behavior has a different connotation.
Yeah, it's really interesting that the instinctual emotional response is fear. Because it's an unfamiliar culture and you don't know what to expect. And you've heard so much about how awful things are in that area.
We were dancing and everything until, again, it was just when we went to this one square room, and there were men there, and we were the only women, and that's when we became, it was like, okay. You know, this is about 30 years ago.
Yeah. Didn't they sell you to Marty?
My secret Okay. Somebody has a slip-headed community.
No. Neve Shalom, or Wahat al-Salam, located in the center of Israel, is the oasis of peace. The only community where Jewish and Palestinian families, all with Israeli citizenship, have lived, worked, and educated their children together for more than 25 years. The community operates the first ever bilingual, binational primary school in the region where children learn together in both Arabic and Hebrew. Over 35,000 young people and adults have studied conflict management at the community's School for Peace.
Oh, wow.
Which is one of those things that will spread if all those people are capable of mediating in that way.
And this is also one of those things that most of you have probably never heard of. And that's why it's one of my pet peeves, that this word just doesn't get around. Did you have your hand up, or are you just resting?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
We need to have an exchange with some of these organizations with USPR skills.
Yeah. Well, they have some
I'm
people.
sure they do, but
The problem is, it's the same problem where, because I do a lot of interfaith work, I am often asked, why do we never hear from the moderate Muslims? Why don't they ever say anything about the crazies? And my answer always is, they do, but our media won't give them the time. That's why you never heard of them. Years and years ago, when I was early 20s, before I actually went to live in Israel, one of my earliest of my many different careers that I've had as an adult was in radio news. I was the news department at PDES, Palm Springs, California, for about a year and a half.
that's where the voice came from.
And even back then, and I told you it was in my early 20s, you can do the math. Even back then, the mantra of the news editor in all of journalism, print, broadcast, TV, whatever, was, if it bleeds, it leads. And it's now even worse than ever. And it's actually one of the main reasons I didn't stay in that profession, because I couldn't work that way. Yes, the moderates do speak out. We never hear them because they're not given the airtime or the newspaper space.
Is that completely true, or a lot of them cowed from speaking as well?
It is completely true. Yes, there are some moderates.
The of Cairo just was in the Wall Street Journal. They tend to put anything in. I have a hard time believing that's true, simply because you have heard nothing from moderate Islam in this country in the last 20 years. And so that was the first article I read where someone, other than right after 9/11, truly came out and said the radicals need to be brought, brought under control.
Was it
Stuff
on
as
NPR?
an excuse.
They are on NPR.
One of the important things, I think, John, that can address your concern is that we people have to go where they are, the moderate Muslims. One of the wonderful things that came out of a group called Bibles and Beer in Cheyenne 4 years or so ago, a bunch of people, all religions, everything. We met upstairs in a bar, had a beer, talked about the Bible every single week. A Jew, a Muslim, a Christian person were prominent in speaking, but all the people were too. I learned more from the Muslim imam than I'd ever known about that religion. Very moderate, normal person. And we were so fortunate to have him. But we have to put ourselves in a position to hear this.
Yeah, again, it's a topic that deserves a lot more than the 2 minutes that we have time today to give it. But yes, the moderates could always say more among the Muslims, but I think that's true among us as well. Part of the problem generally in the world today, in my humble opinion, is that the crazies from all the groups have stolen the stage. Extremists, by definition, are loud, and therefore seem more numerous than they really are. The most numerous group on any scale of any political issue is moderates. Well, by definition, moderates aren't loud. And so one of the things I'm always saying is we moderates have to get louder in our moderation and take back the stage, both generally and within all of the groups. Yes?
That's a story that's told over and over. I mean, as a child of the 70s, we were always talking about the silent majority.
Yeah.
That it was always, the crazies that were doing it and taking them around, put them in the...
Yeah.
As a professional speaker, I can tell you that when it's time to do evaluations, you hear from the people who just adore you. You hear from the people who thought you were full of you-know-what. And the huge, huge number in the middle just walk out and say nothing.
The moderates, by definition, aren't loud. And we moderates have to change that.
Well, they don't think that their voice matters, which is unfortunate.
Which is the problem.
And
That's right.
I was, some people here know that for a number of years I was in a church group here, the only Jewish person. And one of the books we read and studied together was The Battle for God by Karen Armstrong.
Yep.
And what she maintains is that it's always the fundamentalists that get the radio time. And that's, and they're the extremists in every faith, and we have them in Judaism, we have them in Christianity, and we have them in Islam, and probably every other sect that there is on the face of the earth. And that's what they
maybe the
impact on
Quakers.
me.
Maybe the Quakers. Although they had their time too, on the Underground Railroad, they were pretty radical. Yeah.
What I was going to say about the media is it's, like what you said, is it, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, news has become money, so sensationalism is what gets an audience. And they, you know, that's what they're all, everybody's striving for, instead of what's really going on.
That's right. That's right.
And of course, it's a competition among the corporations that own all the
Sure.
And there's so few of them.
Sure.
all we can do is write down newspapers and magazines that you subscribe to, whatever it is, and tell them that you don't want their journalists to use any adverbs or adjectives. That's not the role of journalism.
And the word absolutely.
Nouns and verbs, and that's it. That's the occasional conjunction.
Yeah. Hey, Judy?
Oh, Frank calls himself a militant moderate. And anybody that wants to join his party is welcome.
Militant in moderation. I like it.
Well, I think there's a relatively new mosque here in Fort Collins. Perhaps something we should think about as a group sometime in the future is some sort of a outreach, dialogue.
I saw your grimace, I saw your grimace.
Okay.
Well, no, who knows?
I just speak out here on Sunday morning.
Exactly.
I wanted to say that when the Islam mosque opened, I went to their open house because I was very interested. Because people who know me know that I'm interested in fertilization and ideas. And I was very disappointed that day. They do not have an imam. They have a lay people. And the man who ran the program, I was terribly disappointed in. I took his name, and I since investigated, and he's a CSU professor in the Department of the Veterinary School, and it's a very big position. And he came across, and I thought he said dastardly things, and I was beside myself. And I was sitting, and like as close as I am to the rabbi, because it was a very big room, and when we came in, they didn't have seats, and they ushered my husband and I up into the front. And I had no idea how to judge the audience. So I really, to my shame, I didn't say very much. I was afraid to speak out. I really was. That night, we had a call from a friend who's not Jewish, who I had met through Newcomers, and he wanted to know how I felt because he had the exact same reaction I did. I since found out that this man is kind of quirky, but it sort of scared me because there he is on the campus, and I have no idea what they're saying. But with that being said, I think we should try and reach out and try and see these people in their own environment and let them see us, and maybe they won't take what he said. Somebody asked him, there was a woman there who said what's been said here today, why don't the moderate Islamic people speak out after 9/11? This is what she said. She said she was attached to some embassy in Europe or someplace, and how people approached her individually, but nobody spoke out, like from the community. And what he said was, do you know how many Muslims were killed in 9/11? That was his response. Everyone sat there, and he went and said 50% of the people were. And then I looked it up, there was 38 people.
Okay. But it was still 38 images of God.
Yeah, well, but
we have to be careful of judging a religion of over 2 billion people in the world by one man, or even by 10 people. Okay. Just like the Jewish world, there is a huge range in the Muslim world of points of view, of levels of knowledge, of ability to speak in public. And if one particular outreach effort doesn't work, let's try another one.
I agree, but I just wanted to, I'm frustrated.
Yeah, no. There are sometimes negative experiences. We have to keep looking for the positive. I can tell you, I have had many positive contacts with Muslims. Many. Yeah, and some not so good.
Well, I think it's a
But
good idea.
they're like any other group. We got our crazies too, friends.
I think a lot of it though, it's not, in Fort Collins, and this is Fort Collins, it's not just the Muslims. Right now, there's a huge outcry against the Mormon temple that's going up. And people, if anyone that's not you, I mean, that's different from your religion, because there's all sorts of complaints. Temple's too big, it's da-da-da-da,
Yeah. And some of you may or may not be aware that in the Christian world, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not popular.
Yeah, they don't consider them
Right?
Christian.
Many Christians see them as a cult, as not legitimately Christian. Well, I'm going to go off my topic for just a moment to respond to what you said, because it leads me to something that's still in the general topic that we're talking about. Some years ago, there was a dean of the divinity school at Harvard University by the name of Christer Stendahl, who was Swedish, as you might guess from the name. And at one point in his career, I think it was after he was dean of the school, he was the Bishop of Stockholm, Sweden. It's called the Church of Sweden, but it's essentially Lutheran. And during his term of office as the Bishop of Stockholm, some Mormons came in and wanted to build a Mormon temple. I wasn't aware that that's happening here. It's interesting. And some people, some of his Church of Sweden Lutheran folks, got really upset about it. And he, I think, held a press conference for the media there in Sweden. He said, hey, let's take a time out here, folks. And he came out with what has become known in the world of interfaith as Stendahl's 3 rules of interfaith understanding. Please take notes, it'll be on the quiz. Number 1, if you want to know about a religion that you're not familiar with, ask its followers, not its enemies. Ask its followers, not its enemies. That's number 1. Show Point 2 of Bishop Stendahl was, don't compare your best with their worst, which is something that people do all the time. Right. And number 3, and this is my favorite, save room for holy envy. Holy envy. Now, what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. Glad you asked. It means that there may be something that this other religion does, or believes, or practices, that could never work for you for theological reasons or whatever, but you can respect and even envy a little bit when they do that, what it does for them. And I'll give you an example for me, something that I have a little bit of holy envy for. It could never work for me, for us, for Jews. But one time a friend of mine who was a Catholic priest invited me to a Sunday Mass because there was some special thing in the community, I forget exactly what. And I'm sitting there as the Catholics are going up to the rail to take communion. Yeah, we all know what Catholic communion is, where the priest consecrates a piece of wafer and wine, and Catholics, at least theologically, literally believe that this is the blood and the body of Christ. And they swallow it. Now, you can look at it from a distance and you can say, oh my God, ritual cannibalism. But then stop and think of it from their point of view. You want to get close to God? Take God within you. Literally. The power of that ritual for people for whom it will work theologically is immense. Now, it can't work for me for all kinds of theological reasons, but I can respect what it does for them and appreciate what it does for them and think maybe a little differently about what we do that maybe has some kind of equivalency to it. But that's what Bishop Stendhal meant by holy ending.